Very happy to introduce our honored speaker for this evening. Thanks everyone for making time to participate. It's 6 in the evening here in Israel. So today we are honored to have Kevin Bisti. Kevin Bisti is Deputy Director at the Arizona Department of Transportation, and he's the one leading autonomous mobility and smart mobility in Arizona Department of Transportation. And he will share with us his lessons and experience, vast experience, I have to say, which is pretty rare for this kind of completely new field. He will share with us his experience from pilots like Waymo One service and other driverless pilots that are operating for the moment in Arizona. So thanks, Kevin, for being here, and I pass the microphone to you.
Thank you, Maya, for your kind comments, and good morning from the state of Arizona in the United States. Greetings to my colleagues in Israel. I'm honored to be here this morning to talk with you. Apologies if I say morning and you're in the evening, but I want to thank you for this opportunity to come talk to you about autonomous mobility here in Arizona. Should I, just as a brief background, I started working in this area. I've been with the Department of Transportation here in the state of Arizona for 20 years. We started working in this area probably in the time frame about 2008, 2009. There was a lot of conversation going around in the United States among other state Department of Transportations that self-driving cars were coming, right? Cars that drive themselves are just around the corner, and what are we going to do to prepare for it? And at that time, there was a lot of talk, but there wasn't a whole lot of conversation between industry, government. So things were kind of a big mystery at that point. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Let's see. Now, I am not as tech savvy, so just give me a second, please. Share screen. Let me go to... Okay, can you see that? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can do.
Yes.
All right. Well, let me get my bearings straight here because okay. So just a real brief history, and when I do these when I have these conversations, and I hope it is a conversation because I would like to learn from you how Israel and the different localities and companies there are operating, and hopefully we can share information. But I had a conversation last week with an individual from the Swiss Ministry of Transport in Switzerland, and we had the same conversation that obviously there are differences in legal structures and liability structures in different countries. So with that in mind, I'll give you a kind of a quick history of Arizona's involvement in this. So back in 2012, at that time, it was Google was going around from state to state asking state legislatures to enact laws that would require the Department of Motor Vehicles, which, depending on the state, is the entity that would license drivers, register vehicles, and ensure their operability on the roadways in that state. Here in Arizona, the Motor Vehicle Division is part of our agency. So that's a benefit in a lot of ways because we're able to cohesively deal with these type of issues as one agency. In other states, it's different, like our neighbors to the west, California. There's a separate department for motor vehicles. There's a separate department for highways, and they have their own governing structure as well. So back in 2012, again, Google was trying to get this passed into law, and it did not make it through the legislature at the time. Primarily because it was, again, at that time, there's a lot of talk going on, but there wasn't a whole lot of conversation or sharing of knowledge of what the companies were planning. So the Arizona legislature at the time took a pass and said, let's just continue having the dialogue and working with the companies to see what we would need to do as far as a law. 2013, again, there was discussion, no legislation moved forward. In 2015, we had a new governor elected to the state of Arizona, Governor Doug Ducey. And again, the conversations were bubbling up about preparing for these technologies and how Arizona was going to do that. So he, along with he signed what is called an executive order. And a governor has an ability to issue executive orders for agencies under his or her branch of government, the executive branch, and kind of direct the policy for those agencies. So that was the first entry into this arena for Arizona, and it basically set up an advisory committee for the governor, made up of his agencies: Department of Transportation, Department of Insurance, Department of Public Safety. We had members of our state universities as part of it, our insurance department. And what it allowed for was companies, and at that time there was a company that was interested in doing research and testing on one of the university campuses here, the University of Arizona, and so this allowed for it. So we started a dialogue with a few companies back at that time, and the goal was we wanted to set up a structure, and part of this executive order directed the agencies to review our current regulatory structure and determine, is there anything in the law that currently prohibits these type of vehicles from operating on the roadway? Are there barriers to allowing these type of technologies to operate on the roadway? And what we discovered is that there is no law prohibiting them. What we're talking about is a motor vehicle operating on the roadway. And we already have numerous laws. I mean, I have a thick book here of all the laws that regulate how a vehicle is to be operated on the roadway in Arizona. So we took it from the standpoint of what is currently allowed, what is it that the companies are asking for, and is there any issues prohibiting it? Now, early in the program, all the testing occurred with operators in the vehicle, right? So there really wasn't a whole lot we had to institute to allow vehicles to be tested on our roadway. Vehicles that have passed federal approval, meaning these are vehicles that would be sold regardless of had they had technology or not. So they've already been deemed safe by our federal regulators. And here in America, the federal government regulates the vehicle equipment, the safety, the manufacturing, and everything to do with the vehicle. The states are responsible for who operates the vehicle and how they operate the vehicle on the roadways. So with that in mind, we worked with the companies to say, look, if you're going to be testing here in Arizona and you have operators in the vehicle that can control the vehicle, that can safely operate it if something happens, there's really not a whole lot you have to do from a regulatory standpoint. The vehicle must be registered, just like my vehicle is. The vehicle needs to be insured, just like my vehicle is. And the vehicle needs to be able to operate and understand all the laws in the state of Arizona, just like I as an operator have to. So that was the beginning stages that we set to at least work with the companies and build from what existing laws and policies allowed for vehicles. In 2017, we did introduce a piece of legislation because what we did find is that when it came to trucks, commercial motor vehicles, there were companies that wanted to look at platooning, whereas you get 2 or 3 semi-trucks lined up and following through technology at a close distance. But many of the states in America have laws about what is deemed to be following too closely. So we had to go into the statute and make some tweaks to allow for that testing to occur and not violate the law of following too closely to another vehicle. I'm going to run through just a couple of slides, and then I'd really like to just open it up and have a conversation. So I'll go through the next two real quick. So in 2018, the governor issued 2 additional executive orders because as we evolved with the companies and with the technologies, we had to evolve along with it. And one of the key ones that was passed, I'm going to address in the next slide, but there were 2 additional executive orders that year. There was also a bill in the legislature that passed and was signed by the governor to allow for personal delivery devices. These were basically robotic devices that could operate on certain streets and certain sidewalks to deliver goods. 2019, another law passed to allow for personal mobile cargo carrying devices, which is basically, imagine a suitcase that follows you around. So the legislature proposed and passed that, was signed into law. Now the 2018 executive orders, the one that really was a game changer in my mind was the second executive order. In order to deal with vehicles that now technology has advanced, we have companies that are able to pull the operator out of the vehicle. And so what we had to determine was, well, what does that look like? What does that look like for law enforcement? What does that look like for first responders? What does that look like for the general public? For example, if I'm in a parking lot and I back out and I back into one of these vehicles, if there's a human in behind the wheel, I can exchange information, insurance, and all that. But what if there's nobody in the vehicle? So the executive order directed our Department of Public Safety to work with the companies and local law enforcement, local first responders, fire, EMT, to come up with a plan on what we now call a law enforcement protocol, and requires companies that if you're gonna operate without anybody in the vehicle, you must have these protocols in place. And actually that's been a game changer as far as utilizing our current systems. So right now, if Waymo is the only company that is operating completely autonomous here in Arizona. It's within about a 50-mile radius where you can, from your phone, flag one of these vehicles and it'll drive you anywhere within that zone on city streets, completely autonomous. But they had to put in place, working with the local city, fire, EMT, police, the protocols for how that vehicle can pull over, how it can be safely disabled. If I am a police officer and I run that license plate, all the information on that vehicle would show up. And so the officer has everything they need to handle that vehicle right there. It also requires them that if there is an incident, and we've kind of worked with the companies of what an incident is, and basically at this point, what we've determined is if there is a collision on a public roadway, they are to call a number that goes into our Department of Public Safety duty office, it's called. And then they send out a message to myself and other members of our team so we know exactly what happened. And then there was a third executive order that created the Institute for Automated Mobility. And this is our, it's called the Arizona Commerce Authority. They're our economic development agency here for the state of Arizona. And they've been brought into the fold to help create a place where companies, governments, can come and integrate these technologies into a bigger system. So where we are now is in Arizona, pretty much we're testing everything from small delivery vehicles to commercial motor vehicles. We have Arizona municipalities actively involved, And that's something that has really helped our program, in that we work collaboratively with our local cities and towns, because most of these vehicles are operated on city streets. And one of the critical pieces is that there's good communication between the company and the local government. So we help facilitate that. Some of the companies that are testing here today, we have Waymo, Too Simple. Too Simple is doing commercial vehicle testing from between two of our major cities, Tucson and Phoenix, and they're expanding out towards Texas to the east. General Motors has their Project Cruise here. We have a company, I believe it's an Israeli company actually, Imagery, Udelv, Neuro, Navia, Local Motors, and Beep, all having some level of testing and deployment here in the state of Arizona. So that's kind of a broad overview of where we're at right now in Arizona, how we got here, and some of the issues that we developed along the way. And what I'd like to do, well, there's my information if you need it. I would like to just open it up for a conversation at this point. Any questions or anything you'd like to discuss?
Thank you, Kevin. So I'll just say thank you for the very interesting presentation. As I mentioned before we started the conversation, all the people that are on this call are part of a committee that is now creating recommendations for regulatory framework of the piloting and operating of autonomous vehicles in public roads in Israel. And I think that the first, like all the people here, we are just standing in front of approving a bill that will enable driverless testing in Israel. So we're really trying to get a hold of that. All the issues that you mentioned are really relevant to the people that are here, starting with liability and also the law enforcement issues, safety certification, and contact with local municipalities. So I'll start with, we have here two presenters, I think, from IL Police, Noam Bedyansky and Shlomo Luz, and they have some questions regarding the law enforcement program that you had. So I'll start with that, if that's okay. So there, hi Shlomo. So Noam sent me.
Is always here.
Yeah. So Noam sent me some questions before our discussion. And the first question was, did you have some traffic incident, like violations of traffic laws? And if you did, how did you handle them?
It's been a year and still I have to remember to hit that unmute button. Actually, there's been a few incidents that I'll touch on briefly. One, early on in the program, and this was actually before the law enforcement protocols, we have a law here in the state that when there is a vehicle on the side of the road that has their emergency flashers on, or it's an ambulance or emergency vehicle with their lights on, or it's just me changing a tire and I have my flashers on, that you are to move to the left if possible or slow down, right? That's the law to protect, if something happens to the folks on the side of the road. We had a trooper on the side of the road talking to a driver, and we had a test vehicle with two occupants drive by, and they didn't adhere to that law. Another trooper pulled them over, and it was a autonomous test vehicle. And the trooper talked with the individual behind the wheel and asked them, was it in autonomous mode? Yes. Did you have the ability to control the vehicle? Yes. He was cited for failure to move to the left. So he was treated just like any other driver. And had the vehicle been empty, that citation would have went to the company, and they would have been responsible for that citation. We had, I'm sure you read, we had a very tragic situation in Tempe, Arizona, where a test vehicle with an individual behind the wheel whose job was to monitor the system was driving at night. approached a curve in the road, and an individual who we later determined was impaired with drugs was crossing mid-block at a curve in the dark, pushing a bicycle, and tragedy, the person was struck and killed. Though we wish that never happened, and we deal with that every day on our roadways today, it gave us an opportunity to actually see what happens when this technology is on the roadway. We were part of the investigation from the federal government all the way down to the locals, and we were able to glean information from that vehicle, video from all different angles, and people much smarter than I were able to sit down and piece together piece by piece. Did the operator have the ability to stop or mitigate that accident? And the system worked. The company had to pay the family damages. They settled, they paid them damages. And the operator of that vehicle, it was determined through an investigation, had they not been watching a TV show at the time of the incident, they would have had the ability to stop or at least mitigate. So that person is now being charged with crime. So from a very basic traffic infraction to the most severe, we have been dealing with that, and the current system has been able to address that.
This is Noam speaking. May I ask
Sure.
very important question? Do you allow autonomous cars without drivers to go on the interstate roads without driver inside?
So right now, it is not. It is permitted, but the companies that are doing this are not ready to roll that out. And actually, I was under the impression that that would be the first hurdle that would be easier to jump, right? Because on an interstate, at least here in the United States, it's controlled access. You know, you get on 1 mile, you exit a few miles later, you know, there's no driveways, there's no cross traffic, that would be the easiest. But for right now, they are strictly focused on city streets at 45 miles an hour and below.
And on the city streets, you have autonomous car without drivers inside that are driving on the streets.
Yes, in fact, I have a video. When was this? Oh, this was probably 6 months ago. I'm lucky enough to live in the area in Chandler, Arizona, where Waymo is based, and was able to, when they went public with their Waymo 1, join the program. And now it's not exactly where my house is, but about a mile away, I can flag one of these vehicles. And I'll share it with you when you're ready. I went to my kids' school with my wife, picked up my 2 kids, and said, we're going to go on a little trip. And I ordered the vehicle, and they didn't know what was going on. And here comes the van. We had to meet at a certain location near the school, and the van pulled up, the doors opened, we got in, and we drove around the East Valley for about 40 minutes. And I have a little video footage of it. And my wife and children were never in one of these vehicles. And they were excited for about the first 3 minutes. And then it was like, it's just like you and Dad driving. It's not, except it's more safe. No, you don't drive as aggressive as Dad may drive.
Hey, Kevin.
Yoel, go ahead. And after Yoel, Tamara Lev from Ministry of Justice will ask also a question.
Yeah, this is Joel from the Israeli National Road Safety Authority. I have a few questions. The first one refers to the example that you gave about the accident. You mentioned it happened in the night when it was dark, and you go to the operator who sit in the car. I wonder what was the investigation about the accident, I mean the autonomous car, because it doesn't matter if it's at night or in the day. So you didn't refer to that at all. You are on mute.
See, that's why I'm not creating these types of technologies. I can't even operate the mute button. So the incident in Tempe was examined by our National Transportation Safety Board. These are the folks that go in when we have plane crashes and things like that. So this was from the top down. We didn't know what. We had obviously a police report when the incident happened, but it wasn't until the investigation was complete that we had all the information. Was it the system? Was it the driver? Was it both? Now, again, not to blame the victim, but what we face here in America is when road users don't use the roads as we design them, bad things sometimes happen, right? So the investigation started with a lot of technical folks looking at the system itself, and what through a series of reenactments of the accident scene, they were able to determine that had the operator of the vehicle been paying attention, they would have been able to apply the brakes and they had ample time to avoid that collision. Now, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not it was Uber at the time. Their system was able to identify that it was someone crossing the roadway, and it was determined that their system had a hard time. It was, a bicyclist, it was a pedestrian. Why was it crossing here? And so there was some responsibility on the company, and the company had to they're no longer operating here in Arizona. We issued them a cease and desist for a variety of reasons, but they were deemed not appropriate to be testing on our roadways.
So based on your answer, I assume you have some criteria for allowing a newcomer to test their autonomous car, right? Can you explain what is this minimum requirement that you ask from these manufacturers, like UL 4600, standard UL 4600, that they have to comply to it in order to start this testing in the public roads?
Right. So they have to, and again, it's just like auto manufacturers. It's just like Ford, GM. They have to certify that their equipment is safe to operate. They have to certify to us that they have done the computer modeling, the off-road testing on test tracking and all that. Just like when a car company comes out with a new vehicle with technologies, they have they don't go through a state-by-state certification in order to operate that roadway. So for vehicles that have already passed the federal standard, meaning, like, for example, Waymo is they're using the Chrysler Pacifica van and a Jaguar car. Those vehicles are just equipped with extra equipment, so they're deemed by the federal government to be safe to operate on the roadway. But we don't have, and I don't know of a state agency, and maybe it's different in Israel, but we don't have the technological horsepower within our agency to have people go in and examine AI code and intricacies of how an operating system works. But the company certifies to us that they can safely operate on our roadways.
Okay, and last question. Are there any requirement to get the data from the vehicles during the testing, especially when something occurs?
So the short answer is there is not a requirement. So currently in Arizona and in America, if I am involved in a collision that there are fatalities or there may be some question of criminal activity that caused that, our police agencies have the ability to issue a warrant, to get a warrant for the data that vehicle has, right? So there's no requirement in law that says, well, you know, we were involved in a fatal collision with your vehicle and there were multiple fatalities, you have to turn over your data from your vehicle. So for right now, it's treated just like any other accident, any other collision, any other criminal act with a vehicle. Our authorities have the ability to go to a court and say, I need the data from that vehicle. Now, when we had the incident in Tempe, the company immediately worked with the police department to download everything that they needed for the investigation. Now, as we evolve, there may be, but you know, when we talk about data, you know, our cell phones know everything about us, right? Know where I've been, what I've been looking at, what I've been reading, what my heart rate is. So it's kind of treated the same way. But if there is a criminal act suspected, or it rises to the level where we need to get a warrant and acquire all the data, we can do that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Tamara, are you here?
Hi. Yes, hi. Hi, thank you very much for telling us all this. I'm from the legislative department in the Ministry of Justice, and we are working with the Ministry of Transportation nowadays to really formulate the first bill that would allow the trials and tests to start operate without driver in Israel. And I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, if I understand correctly, and maybe I missed something, the general framework of the legislation is just the general law. There's not many specification for the autonomous vehicle besides the test. But you do have these protocols that you mentioned, the enforcement protocol. So I wonder what is the status of these protocols, and are there? I mean, are they? Do the companies must follow them, or it's kind of agreement? And the second question, which we kind of concern, when you work with companies, when the car is owned by a company, and then you have to deal with them because there was a car accident, who are the functions that you find liable, responsible within the company?
Right. So actually, that's a very timely question, because I was sharing with Maya, our legislature is in session right now, considering a bill where we have taken pieces of the executive orders that we have found to be successful and workable, and put them into state law. So one of them is the law enforcement protocol. So again, we've taken the approach of, let's use our existing authorities up to the point where we can't, right? As we learn about this. So now we're taking those pieces and we are putting them into law. And we believe over time, just like, you know, this Title 28 evolved with motor vehicles when motor vehicles became a thing and horses were no longer a thing, that's how we would develop. And it was interesting. There was what we call the National Academy of Sciences. Their Transportation Research Board came out with a really interesting document, probably 7 or 8 years ago, that basically looked at major transformational things that occurred in society: the railroad, the airplane, the computer, the automobile, and how did those disruptive technologies, how did the regulations come about? And basically it was electricity, the same thing. The technologies came out and the regulations kind of followed. So as far as the companies, for them to operate here, they are required to, and this is also being put in the law, that they are, you know, under our law, the company is the person who is responsible for that. So just like citations, lawsuits, anything like that. Now, we don't get involved in prosecuting people, or, we give information to our county attorney or our attorney general, and they determine if a crime was committed, and then they prosecute the company. I kind of look at it like, we're having, I don't know if it's the same in Israel, but we have an issue going on here now with opioids, where the drug companies, one in particular, there is evidence that they knew that this was extremely addictive and dangerous and hid it from the public. And those executives in those companies are being criminally charged with a crime. So it's kind of the same, similar situation.
Yes, though I must, if I can comment on that, when the people in the company knew that something happened and hid it, that's one thing. We have the same general law regulating this. The other question is, though, if the car is involved in an accident and nobody hid anything, but somehow the production or the coding of the car was done wrongful, then that's a problem.
Yeah, so and this is conversations that obviously is going on around the world, right? And I think the general consensus is, and I'm going to go speak with a group of attorneys in 2 weeks. I think the general, and I am not an attorney, so I accede to your knowledge. The common theory now is going to be, we're going to be moving from personal liability to product liability, right? Just like if I buy something and it catches fire and sets my house on fire and something tragic happens because of a product, it's different than personal liability, unless those individuals in that company knew there was something. So that's kind of the shift that most people see is going to occur. Same thing with an automobile, right? If there is a series of incidences with a certain automobile, that company is going to need to be held accountable, whether that's financially, and if it's a criminal matter, criminally.
Thank you. Someone has any other questions? Yaakov Shem Tov.
Maya, I sent you a lot of other questions.
Yeah, you sent me a lot of other questions there, but I know. But I hope that Kevin, do you have until 5 minutes from now, or?
I do. I had another meeting scheduled, but they're covering it for me.
Okay, so because we do have a lot of questions,
yeah.
So I'll let Yaakov Shem Tov ask a question because I saw that he wants to, and then I'll move on with Noam's question.
Yeah, good evening. I just wanted to ask if you think about asking the operators, I mean, for the autonomous cars, to have a control center, to give some answers if something happened.
So I will tell you that, like, the operators here, so you're talking about like a control center?
Right.
So Waymo does have a facility where they know where every one of their vehicle is, everything that's going on with that vehicle at all times. And they have, it's like a command center, really. If a rider has an issue, they press a button and there's a person that immediately comes on. And I tried that when I did my ride around the East Valley. I just hit the button and, good morning, Mr. Bisti, how may I help you? And said, no, I'm just checking the system, and there's a button. If I need something is happening and I need the vehicle to stop, I hit that button and it knows to pull to a safe location and stop. And then somebody comes on the phone. So we do not have a central monitoring station, but we do, like I mentioned before, we do require, if there is an incident, they are to call our duty office and report it, and then we're alerted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'll go on with Noam's questions. He asked if you use the videos from cameras that are inside the vehicle, for example, in the Uber incident, or if, because we in Israel have issues of privacy. I think it's more accurate when there are passengers that are not actually operating the car. But like, for example, with the Waymo One vehicles, if there is something like an incident occurring inside the vehicle, are you able to use the videos taken in the vehicle, or just like the surrounding cameras of the environment?
So again, with ride sharing, I think for right now, the philosophy is I am in somebody else's vehicle and I'm using this service, just like a lot of our taxi cabs have two-way cameras. We used a lot of the footage from the Uber incident. We were able to see what the driver was doing at all times. And you could see looking down, kind of laughing, and then that this individual was engaged in something other than what they were supposed to do. But for right now, there really is no privacy restrictions because we're talking about a very small percentage of operators in the state. But I do believe as things evolve, we will have to have the conversation of data privacy, what happens in a vehicle. If there's a crime committed, just like if it's in a business, our law enforcement has the ability to go to that business and say, we need that footage, here's a court order, and you have to turn it over. But there is no requirement at this time.
Thanks. And the other question was, did you have any incidents where a police officer that is, controlling the traffic, if there is a traffic light that is going out, or there is a barrier or incident, how does it, that's right, that's the thing. Yeah. So how are the autonomous vehicles doing with that?
So that is something that was a very big concern for local law enforcement. And so they are working with the companies to ensure that is what is going on, is that it is able to determine what, and what the vehicles do now. And again, this is company specific stuff. This is not a mandate by us. But if the vehicle, I'll use Waymo for an example, because they're mainly on the local streets. Too Simple is on the highway. They have other challenges that they're dealing with. But if a vehicle approaches something that it's not sure of, somebody back at the command center will assess the situation and say, okay, that is a no-go, or that is a go. I'll give you a quick story. Just last week, my wife came home and said, hey, my youngest had a play date at a friend's house, and they had they live on like not a cul-de-sac, but like on a corner, and they had those children playing signs, like warning drivers that there's kids playing. And they said a Waymo vehicle approach, it stopped, and it really didn't. The kids weren't in the street; they were up on the driveway. But it kind of waited a few seconds and then drove off. So it was trying to figure out, what is this sign? And so I contacted Waymo and I said, can you go back and look at that situation? I'd like to understand what was the vehicle doing at that time. So we're going to be meeting probably sometime this week or next week to review that.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And also, like, if someone is directing the traffic with voice, like with a megaphone or something like that, that's, I think, maybe a little bit more complicated because it's not something that a radar.
Yeah, I don't think we've run into that situation. But yeah. What we have done and what I encourage other entities to do is, so there are a lot of meetings that go on with Chandler Police Department and Fire and Waymo. And I think we're going to look back and see that as a model, because we had a meeting one day with Waymo engineers and officials and first responders. And the conversation, this was after we had brought together every siren and light configuration on a vehicle we could think of to run it and see how the system operated. And the discussion went along the lines of, you know, at the end of the discussion, it was determined that what might be beneficial is that the Waymo engineers take a ride with firemen and police officers to see what they see out on the roadway. And that was actually a kind of an aha moment. Rather than first responders seeing what the technology can do, is do ride-alongs and see what they see on the roadway. It's eye-opening.
I have a question. Mark from Netivei Israel, it's a national road company. I try to look at autonomous vehicle from the point of view of traffic manager from control center. And I have many cameras and sensors that help me to manage the traffic. But there is a big potential that autonomous vehicles will be another sensors that may help me to manage traffic. So do you think about this direction and to maybe in mandatory way to get data from sensors of autonomous vehicles?
So that conversation is going on, and again, we're in the traffic management business also, right? We have a whole statewide system that we have to keep traffic moving, and the more data we have, the better. In our local cities, and the same thing. And I think from our perspective at this point, we don't require information from automobiles today that could provide us information, right? The cars today are loaded with data that we could find helpful. I used the example of cell phones before. You know, we don't require companies to turn over, you know, well, how many trips did Kevin make from the East Valley to Central Valley, right? Is it possible? Can we at some point? I think so. But right now, our folks are trying to think, I wouldn't know what data to ask for, really, right? Because they are just rich with data, and we wouldn't want them to just give us data that we couldn't use. But they are open to working with us in that. And I think that's what comes about with these collaborations. If there's data that we could use that's non-proprietary and, you know, we sign agreements or whatever, they are open to that. But they are not open to just dumping information into a computer system and without any kind of guidelines, and that's going to come also, just like it is with every other technology.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Kevin. We don't want to take too much of your time.
Well, if you wouldn't, you want me to show that video real quick?
Yeah, sure. If you have,
and Maya, I have a small question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's the title of this talk. You mentioned the trailing cars. Do you use any trailing cars to follow the autonomous car?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you use any means or cars following the autonomous car and seeing what happens?
No, the only time, again, that was, so we have a company called Neuro, and they have delivery robots that it's kind of like, they'll deliver food and all kinds of things, and they can go on roadways 35 miles and below. During their testing, they had a chase car. They had a car that would follow and make sure everything was okay. But no, we do not have a requirement. I know one state had a requirement that it would be followed by a police car, and that didn't last very long because the police didn't want to drive around this vehicle that really didn't do anything all day long. It wasn't a really good resource. That vehicle is treated just like every other vehicle on the roadway. It has to obey our laws. It has to operate safely. If not, we will remove it from the roadway.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just say, to sum it up before we watch the video, I think that we've learned some really important things today. And the first thing was that I think that the Arizona Department of Transportation, it sounds like that from what you're describing, is having really close connection with the companies, an ongoing discourse and working in collaboration with those companies.
Yes.
I like that you say that you're not demanding data because there is so much data and you don't want to demand something that you won't be able to use just for it to lay there and be a burden on the companies. So I think that's also a major insight. And also, like we are really in the middle of our process, and it's fascinating because we are thinking about agile regulation and how to create agile regulatory frameworks. And the example of Arizona that you started with an executive order that is more flexible, it's signed by the governor, it's not legislation, and then to take whatever was successful from that legislation, from that executive orders and pass it to legislation, I think that also is a really good way of work. So thank you for that.
No, and again, if any other questions come up or if you ever want to have a conversation, like I said, I learn a lot also by doing, especially the international conversations, understanding that we have different structures and stuff, but a lot of it is the same. But yeah, this is just a real quick, I don't know, 10, 15 second video. You'll probably feel like my kids going, what's the big whoop? But let me see here. Share screen. So this is so again, that was on a, let's see, did I do that right? Yeah, so that was on a,
in Arizona. This is a kind of street in Arizona. It's look like interstate road in Israel.
that is a city street, a 3-lane north-south street, 45 miles an hour. I had other footage of lane changing and turning, but I didn't want to bore everybody. But, you know, feel free if you ever, you know, once we're allowed to travel again, I'd love to host you here in Arizona, and then we'll go drive around the East Valley and work with our local PD and fire department. They are very excited about this technology. The thought that we may finally be able to move the needle on highway safety. You know, we've made vehicles safe, we made roadways safe. What's the one missing link in this, and the most important? Me. I get behind the wheel and I do stupid things. So,
if I may, one more small question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
This is again, I'm from the police. You ever make a hidden problem like someone make some criminals violation with the autonomous car, like invite the car, put inside like a package of drugs and send it to the address that they need to make the delivery to?
I love
it's not yet.
I love how our law enforcement around the world thinks the same way. Those are the exact same questions. And you know what? This is what I ask people. Take your question and say, you know, do we deal with that today in any situation, right? Like, what prevents me from calling Uber and saying, hey, I need this package delivered to my girlfriend or my office? Can it happen? Absolutely. But again, we have mechanisms. You know, people often ask me, well, what happens if the vehicle doesn't stop, right? And police can't pull it over. I say, look, somewhere in the United States today, there is a vehicle that is not heeding to a law enforcement vehicle. We have procedures to stop that vehicle. In this situation, we're not introducing anything new. We will, but the good thing is we can go back to the company and say, you got a problem, you need to fix it. If it was Kevin, you know, what are you doing? You're going to send me to jail? You're going to fine me? Does it really change my behavior? Sometimes, sometimes not. But think about it. We're going from millions of operating systems out on the roadway today, various ages, experience, impairments. What if we had 5 operating systems or 1 operating system operating vehicles on the roadway? And when there's a problem, we can go in and address it.
Interesting. For the movie.
Thank you so much.
Maybe one more question.
Sure.
We'll stay here forever, so Kevin, if you're willing to take questions, then we're happy, but just let us know.
I have a question. Ask?
Yes, Yaron. I don't know, it's up to Kevin, because we're really out of time, so I don't want, we're Israelis, we will always try and try.
How often do I get to talk to folks from another country? Go ahead.
Kevin, I'm also from the police, and I want to go back to the accident that you mentioned before. The police took the data from the car, you said. Did they use the programmer to get the data, or they use regular equipment?
My understanding, and again, I'm not in law enforcement, though we have a law enforcement component in our agency, was that they used their usual equipment, that they were able to download what they needed. And Uber at the time was very forthcoming in getting people in a room and with their engineers and showing, what the brake pedal pressure was. And I mean, it was mind blowing, but all the video was downloaded to the police department.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, do you have long-term goals for autonomous vehicle? For example, reducing traffic jams, 10 years forward, for example?
So maybe not so much. I mean, it depends on the industry. It depends on the public's desire, right? Go back to before the automobile, when people were on horseback, the problem was, we need to reduce all this horse waste, right? We're running out of places to put it. And then the automobile came, and, now we're dealing with congestion. I think, again, I am not a forecaster but if you look at the trends, it's going to be a long time before I can purchase one of these vehicles. What you're going to see is fleet owned, right? I may not buy a vehicle. I may just have this service to use whenever I want, mobility on demand. It's going to take me, I've got a meeting here at my office right now with you. I need to go downtown. I press a button. It comes, a pod or whatever it is. I get in it, and it takes me to my next meeting, and it knows that, Jennifer is waiting on that end to go somewhere else. And so I think we're going to see this shift gradually and long-term from maybe vehicle ownership as a priority to mobility on demand. It may take me to a train or a bus that'll take me somewhere.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Kevin. It was really, really, really nice talking to you and super interesting. And we would like to keep in touch.
Absolutely.
Of course, and take Waymo One for a ride.
Yeah, and I'd like to see how you're progressing as well. So please, let's keep in touch. And again, any questions or anything, we're here to help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day today.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.